Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program Garden for Climate Resilience with Trevor Smith from Weston Nurseries. We're really excited to hear Trevor's message, but first, a few comments from our co-sponsors tonight, the Acton Garden Club, Energize Acton, and first up, Susan Mitchell-Hart from the Acton Conservation Trust.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for coming for this fantastic event. Been looking forward to this. I wanted to let you know, President of the Acton Conservation Trust, Acton's local land trust, Town of Acton is blessed with a unique land preservation ecosystem. The Open Space Committee, the Community Preservation Committee, and other town boards have worked tirelessly for the past 20 years to seek out lands for permanent protection. The Acton Conservation Trust occupies a special and well-respected role in this ecosystem, as it's the only private member-supported organization. As a 501c3 nonprofit supported solely by member contributions, our singular focus is to protect and conserve land in Acton for conservation, agriculture, and other public benefit. With this mission, we proactively seek out opportunities for permanent land protection. All of the properties shown in the pictures, oh, you don't have the card, but anyway, and on those pictures, some of those, and many others were projects initiated by ACT, and there are always more in the pipeline. So you too can take concrete action when it comes to fighting climate change, protecting our watershed, our forests, diverse species, habitats, and beautiful nature trails. To learn more, go to our website, and please add your support to that of so many other town residents by clicking on Join or Donate today. Incidentally, I needed to update the number of acres we protected. I forgot to include the 107 acres of Department of Correction agricultural land back in 2008. We supported it morally and with funds. Anyway, it's very, very special, and we'll have another opportunity.
Hi, my name is Karen Root Watkins with EnergizeActon.org. Energize Acton is a community website and education group with the mission to help Acton households and businesses to become net zero through clean energy technology, lifestyle changes, and land care based on ecological principles. It may seem strange to talk about heat pumps on the one hand and pollinator gardens or rain gardens on the other hand, but they both are connected. How we use energy really matters for the natural world, and the health of the natural world is critical to our clean energy future. So please check out our website. There is a ton of information on there related to all different types of actions you can take, and you can track those actions. We also have events. Energize Acton is co-sponsored by the Acton Climate Coalition and the Town of Acton Sustainability Office. And today we have with us Lauren West from the Sustainability Office to talk about a really great project that they're doing that's very timely.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren West, and I'm the environmental analyst for the Town of Acton. I work in the Sustainability Office, which is located over in the Red House. It's right next door. And like Karen said, we recently received a grant to renovate the outside of the space to make it kind of a climate resilience hub. It'll be focused on nature-based solutions, making the space more welcoming and more apparent that it is a public space. And also there will be example gardens like rain gardens and pollinator gardens for residents to replicate. You can go on. This is a little bit of what the design will look like. We've included a bioswale, a rain garden, a pollinator garden, shade gardens, just lots of examples of how you can build resilience at home. And on the next slide, we're definitely seeking community involvement and input. We have a survey out right now that's at that QR code. I have a flyer that's also at the front of the room with the links and the QR codes. Or you could email sustainability@actonma.gov for any of this information. And we also have a form out right now where we're accepting volunteers. So if you'd like to get involved either with ideas for the project or actually volunteering to help with the gardening, we would love to see you all there. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jody McDonald. I organize the programs for the Acton Garden Club, and I am so happy to be working with my colleagues at Energize Acton and Acton Conservation Trust. It's things like this where people with like-minded philosophies can get together, learn together, work together. It's really a wonderful opportunity. The Acton Garden Club is 90 years young. In 2024, it's a pretty good milestone. I think most people in town know us best from our plant sale in May, and that takes place this year on May 18th. It's right over by the Red House. So if you come by, there'll be all the members there ready to help you pick plants and answer your questions, so please stop by. The money that we raise from the plant sale is how we fund all of our community activities, including our educational programs. Those take place almost every month. There is one in May, on May 7th. Tia Pinney, who is a naturalist and biologist, will be speaking about living with wildlife in Massachusetts. So feel free to join us at the program. The details are on our website. Our programs are free and open to the public. And we always love to have people come in and see what we're up to. And I do just want to take a moment to mention Shirley Toll. She was a longtime member and also president of the Acton Garden Club. She bequeathed a sum of money to the club so that we could continue to promote gardening and promote mutually beneficial experiences, which I think tonight's event certainly meets that criteria. So next up, we're going to have Trevor Smith. He is here from Weston Gardens in Hopkinton. And check my notes with your extensive bio. Trevor has 20 years of field experience as an entrepreneur and a regenerative landscape designer. And if you don't know what that is, you're going to find out tonight. He specializes in green stormwater infrastructure, things like permeable pavers and rain gardens. And the landscapes he designs are meant to balance the Earth's systems with the needs of Earth's inhabitants. Humans, but also plants and birds and bees and everything else that has to survive on our planet. I think you'll agree when you hear Trevor speak that he is very passionate about the natural world. I'm looking forward to hearing his talk tonight. He holds several landscape certifications, including Massachusetts Certified Horticulturist, the New England Organic Farm Association's Organic Land Care certification, LEED Green Associate. I'm sure plenty others as well. He's a past president of the Ecological Landscape Alliance and is currently a trustee of that organization. So I just want to take a moment before I bring Trevor up to remind everyone at home to please stay muted, both your audio and your video. There will be time for questions at the end. Just put them in the chat and we'll go through the questions and give them to Trevor to answer once he's done with his presentation. And I would also just like the folks who are here to keep in mind that the microphone is pretty sensitive, so if you can keep noise to a minimum, because sometimes noise from the background makes it hard for the folks at home to hear what we really want them to hear. Okay, and if I haven't said it already, we are being recorded. So if there's anything you don't want the world to know about, you don't jump up and say it during the presentation. Okay, Trevor?
All right. So this is great. Thank you so much for having me. Excuse me one moment. All right, now we're good to go. So yes, my name is Trevor Smith. I am the Design and Education Manager at Weston Nurseries. I've been there for about 3 years. I was brought on to develop the education department and also develop the native plant division. Before that, I had my own business, Land Escapes. Many of you have known that. Now it is known as Re-Earth Boston, and it is a regenerative land care education and consulting business, which is exactly what I also do with Weston Nurseries. And we are going to get into all of that. So what much of my work is about, much of what I would like to encourage you all to do is I am not asking anybody to give up anything. I am asking people to be a little more thoughtful with what it is you do. I'm not saying that we have every right to be here. I just want you to acknowledge that all the other plants and animals on this planet also have a right to be here. So we have our built environment, and my job is to educate people and design landscapes that restore that balance so that we can have our piece of the planet and we can share it with others. So one of the greatest things that has just happened is for the 3rd year in a row, I have a little pond in my backyard. I live on a postage stamp in Arlington. The backyard is probably smaller than this room, but I have a little pond in the backyard. 3rd year in a row, I've had 2 ducks that come by. They do not nest there. The pond is way too small, but they come by and they use it as a spa for a little bit before they go on and raise their young elsewhere. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight and what I'm going to tell you is nature will let you know if you're doing it right. So many of us, as we're gardening, as we're out in the landscape, as we're out in nature, we're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I have a black thumb. I don't know if I'm doing this right. When things like that happen, when you find salamanders on your property and the like, nature lets you know you're doing it right. So I am a huge advocate of, yes, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube. There's lots of wonderful books. Nature will back you. If you have a question, then that's where it is. So we're just going to dive right into this. And this happened in 2021, and it also happened again this past year. I was on a Zoom call, a national Zoom call, with people who were evacuated from wildfires and people who were evacuated from floods. This was a huge wake-up moment for me. So I was on and people were saying, yes, I'm in Tennessee because we're having massive floods down south. Or people were saying, yes, I'm staying in a hotel because California was burning. Why this was a huge wake-up call for me is because it just let me know that climate refugees are here and now in our country. So I always thought like, oh, climate refugees, that's going to be as, the continent of Africa, aridifies and everything else. Or there's going to be massive like tsunamis or something elsewhere, like an over there thing that was going to, islands were going to get swallowed up by the ocean and people were going to have to move away. No, it's happening here and now. And so it really made me aware of it. And since then, I've just been very hyper aware of just the shifting climate. So we all know this climate map, and this all gets very scary. Now, one of the things that I would love to really instill tonight and this evening is that when we think about climate change, we think, wow, this is huge. We think, oh my gosh, the nations of the world need to come together and save us. Or, corporations need to change their ways and save us. I am going to say we need to save us. Because if we're going to wait for all the nations of the world to agree, we're going to be waiting quite some time. And if we're going to wait for all the corporations to kind of put aside their own agendas and care about everything else, we're going to be waiting some time. I'm not bashing the governments and I'm not bashing corporations. What I'm saying is, why should we wait? Let's just do it. I have, like I said, a postage stamp in Arlington. I'm doing it there, ducks for the 3rd year in a row. So we can all do it. And if everybody on this call, and everybody in this room, got together and did it, I don't know, if you have a postage stamp, that's great. If you have multiple acres, that's great. Let's just say we got 100 acres between all of us. That's an impact. My postage stamp plus yours, that's an impact. We can all get together. And if everybody who, hears this afterwards, gets together, gets inspired and does it, now we're starting to add up. And that's where I really feel we can all make a difference. And I've also learned, and I'm going to teach you, this evening, how very simple modifications on our own property can actually help combat climate change. So we have the unique distinction of actually warming faster than the rest of the planet. New England is very lucky in that way. We're actually warming a whole lot faster. You wouldn't think so, but because of the ice flows and the glaciers up in Greenland, and because of the way climate and weather moves across the planet and the oceans move, we are actually warming faster than the rest of the world. We're actually 2 degrees warmer. So this is rather alarming. And if you have just seen the new hardiness zone climate map, also rather alarming. I promise this is not a doom and gloom presentation, okay? This is actually going to be inspiring, but I'm trying to get us all on the same page. However, the climate map, I mean, I have been designing for over 20 years, and I've been designing as a Zone 5 landscape professional. You know, to then find out that we're like 6A and B and the like was rather alarming to me. I wasn't like, oh, I'm so surprised. No, it certainly didn't surprise me whatsoever, but it just was the verification that what we all suspected is true. So the fact is, we are never going to go back to the way it was. So like, we can't sit here and think that we can reverse time, draw back time, really draw back climate. We're not going to ever go back to the way things were, especially 100 years ago, but even 50 years ago. We're not going to reverse that. So we have to get that idea out of our head. But that does not mean that we are helpless and that we can't take action. You know, so what about now, and what do we do now? Well, now I'm going to say these images right here, while heartbreaking and everything else, I want you to take these out of your head. Because this image right here, like I said, is heartbreaking. It makes us feel helpless. And this is far away. This is my backyard. Why don't we focus on maybe saving, as my second graders call it, this is my girlfriend because it's my favorite bee. So they say, oh, that's your girlfriend, you're getting married. So yeah, the green sweat bee is my favorite bee, she's my girlfriend. So I would say we turn our attention to focusing on something that's in our backyard, like our native bees, like our native plants, like our flora and fauna that we have here. Focus on that, let's do that, because we can do something here. We can donate money to funds that are gonna help on the greater scale, but they may or may not save that polar bear. But that polar bear breaks our heart. This inspires me. This inspires me, and because she's in my backyard, she makes me wanna take action here and now. So the days of landscaping for beauty alone are over. This is a message that I give to all of you. This is a message that I give to landscape professionals. This is a slide that I use often. Our current approach to land care is akin to sending plastic and rubber and steel to a factory without knowing who works there and waiting and hoping that a car comes out the other side. This is how the landscape industry treats the planet, and this is actually how we treat the planet, because we get suckered in by these beautiful colored bags with all these promises. You use this and it's all you need and you're gonna have the best garden ever. And we have all these sprays and everything else that promise us the world, but we don't necessarily take the time, and some of us don't have the knowledge, and that's fine. But land care professionals like myself don't necessarily take the time to understand what your land needs. So the industry sells us like a 4-step. And we're like, okay, well, you need this. It's this time of year, you need this. Do you? Has your land care professional taken a soil test? Has your land care professional bothered to get to know your property? You may or may not know. I hear all the time. I'm there for a different reason. I might be on your property to talk about a pollinator garden, but then somebody always relates to me like, I'll be looking at the ground and I'll be seeing fertilizer all over the ground and the grass will look like crap. And I'll just be like, so what's up with this? And they're like, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, well, who are you paying for this? You know, you're paying somebody and you're just blindly paying them and they're saying this is what you need, but your grass looks like that. I mean, if you're paying that much money, it should look like a golf course if that's what you're looking for, but it doesn't. And they just keep putting that stuff down without even checking. And that's because, I mean, on my end, on the green industries end, I believe that we need to own and hone our craft. On a homeowner end or a residential end, you know, it's your due diligence and it's your job to vet your landscape professional, if you use a landscape professional, but to also try to understand your planet, you know, and your piece of the planet and what's going on to the best of your ability. I'm not asking you all to become horticulturists, not at all. Botanists, no. Biologists, no. You don't have to. But I would ask you to just think and maybe have an idea. You don't even all have to run out and get a soil test, but just don't fall for all the bags and don't go for the silver bullet. See, what happened is the more detached we became from the planet, the more we fell for somebody being like, this is all you need. We do it with our health too. And we just kind of farm out our health. And somebody's like, this is all you need to be healthy forever. And we're like, okay, sure, I'll take that. Well, but that may not be it. So you have to know, you know your property, you know your garden. And that's where this is, and this is what I'm trying to get across to you. So my argument is that our view of sustainability is getting rather blurry. So when we say sustainability, when we say I'm a sustainability officer, when we say I practice sustainability, when we say the word, we feel a certain way. We think a certain way. We're like, okay, this is what sustainability means. However, our actions speak very differently. Our actions towards sustainability are very much, how far can I go before I break it? How much can I take before it's too much? It's very akin to the way I was with my sister when I was little. I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, and getting closer and closer. How close can I get before she finally punches me? How close can I get before we finally break it? So this is what regenerative land care is all about. So I call myself a regenerative land care professional. Some people would call me an eco-landscaper. It's a little bit different. And this is where the difference is. If you look at our current climate situation, if you look at our current landscape situation, by landscape, I mean the way landscapers treat the planet, and the way our climate is, and the way we are. If you look at that like having the flu, you don't want to sustain now. When you're sick, do you want to sustain? We're losing species and insects and birds at an exponential rate. Do we want to keep doing that? No. When you're sick, you want to get better. You want your systems to get back online. You want to get healthy, and then you want to sustain. And that's what being a land care professional is all about, a regenerative land care professional is all about. I look at sustainability as a goal that we want to get to. I do not want to stay here with the emaciated polar bears and native bees going extinct. I want to regenerate. I want to restore those populations. I want to restore our hydrology. I want to restore our soil health, and then just get out of the way. Because Mother Nature did a great job without us interfering before all those colorful bags and the sprays. She did a great job. So really, gardening is a piece of cake, and it's actually a hands-off thing, okay? We've made it complicated. We've overcomplicated it. So regenerative land care is all about getting Mother Nature systems back online, restoring plant communities, and doing what we have to do, then getting out of the way and just enjoying it. We don't want to practice sustainability now because things aren't healthy now. So you don't want to feel like crap forever, but we don't want to keep the planet like this forever. So we talk about ecosystem services. I mean, which one of these is providing an ecosystem service? This is my second favorite bee, the great black digger wasp. I love that iridescent blue. I have a thing for the iridescent bees, I guess. But when you ask yourself which one of these is performing an ecosystem service? Ecosystem services, well, here we have the definition. These include provisioning services such as food and water, regulating services such as flood and disease control, cultural services such as spiritual, recreational, and cultural benefits, and supporting services such as nutrient cycling and maintaining the conditions for life on Earth. That's what ecosystem services are about. That is not what somebody with a backpack blower is doing. Okay, they're certainly not providing that cultural, or they're not providing Zen. Let me tell you, I mean, I don't know how it is in Acton. I know in many of the places that I work, I'll get there at 8 in the morning and the landscape crews will be there, and then I will hear them all day long because they just go around to all the other houses, and I'm hearing that same crew all day. I know what they're doing, and I understand, and I am not saying that they're bad or that they shouldn't make a living. I'm all for that. I'm saying, can we find an alternate way? And I'm also saying, is that really good for the planet? Is that really good for our garden? Because we hired a landscaper, is it good for our yard? I question that. So tonight I'm really going to focus mostly on, we're going to focus on soil, we're going to focus on water, and we're going to focus on plants and animals. So we start with the soil. And this is some really healthy soil. This is some of my favorite soil. And the answer, as I say, is beneath our feet. It's all right there. You need a good foundation. It all starts with the foundation. You have to have a foundation. People forget the soil when we're talking about climate change and when we're talking about healthy planet. We forget the foundation itself and what it's all built on. So here's just, I mean, of course, we have the basics. We have sand, silt, and clay. That's the mineral component of soil. Then we have air holding capacity and water holding capacity, and then we have the organic matter. One of the biggest contributors to climate change and the climate crisis that nobody's really acknowledging is soil compaction. We don't think about that. It's soil compaction is the loss of pore space. So we lose that water holding capacity. We lose the air holding capacity within the soil. So preventing overcompaction should be the primary concern of my industry, but is also something that you need to advocate for yourselves on your property. If you're having construction done, ask that land care professional, what's your compaction policy, or what's your plan? So when I had my company, and even now, we had a plan. Sometimes it was just as easy as putting boards down. But even somebody running mulch back and forth all day can compact soil. It's not just machines. However, the machines can compact the soil 2 to 3 feet down. That you're not going to necessarily just fix with an aerator or even, or any kind of even a broad fork. It's not going to happen. It takes nature to fix something that is compacted that far down. So this is because when we do this, when we compact our soil, we lose the ability for carbon sequestration. When we have our compacted soil, we increase the flooding that we have. Compaction affects hydrology, as I just talked about. Compaction affects carbon sequestration, like I talked about. It also affects biodiversity, above and below ground. This image right here is what many people, and what I try to teach people in my industry, this is what we don't see. This is what we don't see. A house gets built. I will get invited to this house after it's done. It's going to have a green lawn and a real simple foundation planting. And people are going to be like, all right, I got the contractor special. I want you to fix this. Well, that cat has been driving all around this soil and has compacted it 2 to 3 feet down. And then what they did was they graded it out. They threw 4 to 6 inches of topsoil down, planted a lawn, thrown some bushes in it. Then these people say, it's weird. This is a brand new house, but I have so much puddling and flooding in my yard, or nothing grows. Well, that's because you have concrete 4 inches down. So of course nothing's growing. And of course you have a water problem. It doesn't matter that you have a brand new house. Now the biodiversity is above and below ground. We were just talking about how it's hard to get things to grow. Well, when you have compacted soil like this, when you have major compaction, now you've eliminated all the life in the soil. And I'm not just talking about the worms. I'm talking about the real small guys too. I mean, we talk about how in a teaspoon of soil, there's more organisms than all the people on the planet. Well, that's absolutely true. And we need all of them to grow healthy plants, and we need all of them for carbon sequestration. I've never seen a nitrogen deficient plant in a natural ecosystem. Obviously, we're doing something wrong with agriculture and landscape, interfering with biological fixation of nitrogen. This was my friend who said this, and it's one of Christine Jones, and it's one of my favorite sayings. It's when she ever said this, I couldn't write it down fast enough, because it's absolutely true. Go out in the woods, find a nitrogen deficient tree. Doesn't happen. Nature can do this. We don't need pounds and pounds of fertilizer on our gardens and in our agriculture, and we certainly don't need it on our lawns and in our landscapes. Not if we do it right. So we obviously are doing something wrong. So what I advocate for is restoring the soil carbon sponge. So this is carbon cycling. So we want to focus on carbon sequestration. We want to draw it down, but we also need carbon to go back into the air. And we need to have a healthy balance and a healthy cycle of carbon. It's all balance that we're looking for. We don't have to eradicate or go one way. We go all the way one way and we go all the way the other way. We don't have to do that. It's just the balance. It's okay to have carbon in the atmosphere. We need that. As my second graders talk about, that's what trees need. That's what they breathe. And then they give us oxygen. Yes, it's very true. We all know that in our heads, but we don't, it's because we've forgotten the very simple pieces that has confused things. We thought it was a lot more complicated than it really is. We've forgotten how simple it really is. The big difference between conventional and regenerative landscaping is whether or not you're treating the soil as a living organism that constantly needs to be fed carbon via living plant roots. Again, it goes way back to basics, and I'm going to take you back to basics, and some of you might be like, yeah, Trev, that was really basic and stupid. But others of you might be like, you know what, I totally forgot. Learned that in 5th grade, 3rd grade. Totally forgot. It's this big exchange. Carbohydrates for minerals and water. What happens is, so trees are not built from soil. Trees are built from thin air, okay? Photosynthesis, it all comes from thin air. The trees, through photosynthesis, make sugar. They send that sugar into the ground. They feed all the life in the soil. The life in the soil digests all the minerals in the soil and makes it water soluble. The water in the soil then allows the tree to take all that up. We know this, but we don't think about it. We don't realize how important that simple connection is. 20 to 80% of a plant's carbohydrates, which is carbon, is to feed the soil organisms, also carbon. So the trees taking carbon out of the air and sending it into the soil, that's carbon sequestration. The trees feeding the life in the soil and then growing the life in the soil exponentially, carbon sequestration. The more life, the more protozoa, beetles, and worms you have in the soil, the more carbon is in the soil. The larger and greater the tree roots are in the soil, the more carbon is in the soil. The greater our plants and the more biomass we have, that's the more carbon we've sequestered out of the air. I know, that sounds really basic, but like I said, we've forgotten the basics. For every 1 gram of carbon sequestered in the soil, we hold 8 grams of water. Did we have any water last year? Are you looking at any water this year? Do you think we should increase the water holding capacity of the soil? Maybe something to consider. As we just talked about, another friend of mine, Dan Kittredge, you might know him from the Bionutrient Food Association. My favorite saying of his, plants don't have the ability to digest soil. It's what lives in the soil that digests the soil, and then plants take that up. A root touching the soil, which is where we get it twisted. A root touching the soil does not a plant make. It's these guys, the protozoa, the nematodes, the bacteria, the hyphae. All of this is what breaks down the minerals of the soil and then makes it available for the plant. So we have to this is what we want to grow. This is carbon. And this is, if we can grow this in the soil, then our gardens will be lower maintenance, which is great, which is what we want. Our plants will be more robust and have a better immune system, which is great and what we want. We'll be able to save a whole lot of money because we won't need fertilizer or anything that has a side in it, which is what we want. So, like I said, it's real easy. Healthy soil is full of life. In fact, it's the most biodiverse place on earth. When the soil food web is activated, diverse plants and animals will return above ground to above ground habitats, and above ground habitats can be restored, sorry. For every 1% of soil organic matter, the soil will hold 20 to 25,000 gallons of water per acre. Wow. 1%. So if you went and sent your soil test in and it came back as 5% organic matter, and you were to love your soil, maybe leave the leaves, add compost, leaf mulch, etc., and do all that. If you were to increase that to 6%, and you live on 1 acre, on a 1 acre property, you have 1 acre of garden, now you've just increased that water holding capacity by 20 to 25,000 gallons. A 1-inch rainstorm on 1 acre of land is 27,000 gallons of water. So we've been getting more than 1 inch at a time, absolutely. And we've been having serious water problems all over. Again, if we increase the water holding capacity of the soil, we'll be great. Now that was last year. Let's go back 2 years when we had the drought. That was crazy. Okay, if we had this kind of water holding capacity, how much would your gardens really suffered? I'm gonna tell you, 2 years ago, my garden absolutely suffered. My plants were stressed. Would I put it on a garden tour? Absolutely not. However, my plants all bounced back. They all came back. If you have 7 to 8% organic matter in your soil, you can go 90 to 100 days between rainstorms, and there will be enough water in that soil for your plants to find. Which brings us to water. This is one of my favorite pictures. I have very few things on my bucket list. So things on my bucket list. One was to see the glaciers before they're gone. That's where this is from. That's a 700-year-old bubble. That's why I loved it, and that's why I have this picture. The other one is really to see the monarchs, all down in Mexico. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I have a very small bucket. It's more like a thimble, but So what is the problem? Well, the problem is since the 80s, the number of extreme meteorological events has doubled. And we know this. We're living this. Which brings us to this, the natural water cycle. I want you to pay just a little bit of attention to this. Again, we're going back to 5th grade. Here we are, back in 5th grade. Look at you kids. Hi, kids. The natural water cycle. If you just look at some of these numbers, the evapotranspiration is 40 to 50%. I want you to notice all the way on the left, it says surface runoff, less than 1%. Interflow, 20 to 30%. This is how it was supposed to work. This is a single picture of a watershed. And in this watershed, in nature, when it rains, it takes weeks, hours, weeks, sometimes longer, for all that water to make its way all the way down through that forest and through that soil down to the lake. That's how it was supposed to work. This is kind of how it works right now. Now, if you remember, evapotranspiration was 40 to 50%. Well, with our reduced vegetation and increased compaction, our evapotranspiration is now 20 to 30%. Remember that less than 1% surface runoff? Well, now we're at 20 to 40% surface runoff. Remember that interflow being like 30 to 40%? Well, it's 0 to 30. That interflow is the groundwater. That's the water it's all the water that makes it into the ground and then moves its way through. What is the problem? Well, the problem is now Mother Nature designed all the rivers, the Concord River, everything we see. They've all been the perfect size. And they all have floodplains. If you see the floodplains and everything that we have, they're all maxed out. But they were designed that way. And that's because it was designed for the water to take hours and weeks to make it there. Now it's making it there in minutes. Now it comes right off, it runs right off our hard surfaces, goes into a storm drain. The storm drain goes right out to the river. The rivers are filling too fast. And then we see things on the news and we're like, oh my goodness, we have a flooding problem. Look at this. This is Arlington. Look at Arlington. Arlington's got a flooding problem. No, Arlington has an infiltration problem. And if we call it what it is, then we can fix it. If we try to fix flooding, we're just going to take the water here and put it there. If we try to fix infiltration, we're going to try to get the water in the ground. And we're going to think about things like water holding capacity. And we're going to think about fixing our soil and not, how can I put a pipe here and where can that pipe go? This is essentially how we deal with flooding currently. I am a water geek. You will find me out in rainstorms all the time, taking pictures like this, and many others, if you've seen any of my stormwater presentations. So where is that water going? Is that water going away? Yeah? Where's away? We're a blue marble floating in space. Where's away? There isn't an away. It just goes elsewhere and becomes a problem elsewhere. We can take that water off our parking lot, and then our parking lot's not flooded, but then it all goes right to the river. And then what happens? Well, have you ever noticed now, and this has been really jumping out at me, every time you're driving by a river or a pond or something like that, it has the don't eat the fish. You can't eat the fish anywhere. Not that I want to eat the fish, not that I'm a big fisherman or fisher person. I don't fish at all. But it's really been these signs, because I think it's because there's no leaves on the trees and they jump out at me. But I've really been noticing, like everywhere I go, it's like, don't eat the fish. Like, wow, okay, why not? Why? Because we tried to invent a way that doesn't exist. And now our fish are full of heavy metals and everything else under the sun. This is kind of how we've dealt with our water problems. We've just kind of shoved it all in the closet, closed the door and be like, it's clean. That was me at like 14. Clean your room. Clean. No, we just shoved it all in the closet and hoped that it would go away. So what I advocate for, and what I would love for you to think of as a town and for your own property, is green infrastructure or nature-based solutions. That is what regenerative land care is about, nature-based solutions. I want you to think about stormwater management that protects, restores, or mimics the natural water cycle. What does that mean? That means rain gardens or bioretention cells. So a bioretention cell is really a large engineered rain garden that could take maybe all the runoff from a parking lot. A rain garden is something you're going to have at your house that's going to handle the runoff from your, from one of your downspouts. Porous pavement and porous asphalt, any kind of permeable pavements. Now we're mimicking nature. Now when it rains, and as the water moves across the land, it is infiltrating into the soil. It's getting back into the ground. Then we don't have to worry so much about, you know, the aquifers going dry. We don't have to worry so much about many of the things that happen because we don't have that water recharge. Green roofs is something that is near and dear to my heart, and I was actually talking about just before we got on here. So back in 2016, with a grant from the EPA, we worked with Youth Build Boston and put green roofs on bus shelters, just to bring the green roof conversation and the nature-based solution conversation down to street level, and to show the city and everybody else the power of just a small green roof at 60 square feet. Well, the current mayor has actually signed on to do 30 green roofs. Now, if we did every green roof in Boston, that would equal about an acre, which I said in a 1-inch rain event is 27,000 gallons. Well, if we could offset 27,000 gallons of water, then we probably wouldn't be overwhelming the antiquated stormwater systems that we have in our cities. Arlington and Belmont both have 80-year-old stormwater and water systems. So the pipes that are coming in and bringing the water in to Arlington are about 80 years old. The stormwater systems are about 80 years old. I'm going to tell you, the population of Arlington has probably grown a smidge, just like Acton, probably grown a smidge in the past 80 years. Since I grew up here, I know it has, okay? So with all that, then we get to this. We get to the good part. We get to the part we like, the plants, the animals. This is what we want. This is when nature lets you know you're doing it right. This is my favorite part of my job. Moments like this. Pretty much moments like anything that happens in nature, because if you think about it, almost every moment that happens in nature is just for you, okay? If you are in the fall, if you are driving and you happen to see leaves falling and nobody else is around, you're the only person that saw that leaf. And guess what? That leaf was one of a kind. There was never another leaf like it. Leaves are like snowflakes. So a maple tree can make thousands and thousands of leaves every single year, but no two have ever been the same. So when you see a leaf, that is a one-of-a-kind leaf, and that is a one-of-a-kind moment that's just for you, which to me is absolutely beautiful. So I advocate and say, please plant the change you wish to see in the world. Like this. When I show this picture to the second graders, I say, hey, does anybody know a messy eater at home? And the hands go right up. They're like, yeah, my brother is terrible. So we talk about that. We talk about now how all the bees that you see now, like the bumblebees that you see now in April, those are all the queens. Those are all the queens. They're out, they're looking to build their new home. That's what you're seeing right now. So those, like if you see a queen, if one gets stuck in your house or something, please save it, because that is the future right there. So that's who you're seeing right now flying around. They're trying to find their home. I have a few making nests in my garden around the house, and I get very excited when I see that. So yeah, let me guess, native plants. Yeah, I knew this guy was going to talk about native plants eventually. Come on, here we go. So why natives? Why native plants? Okay, well, greater climate resilience, it's absolutely true. Native plants aren't no maintenance, but native plants, especially what's called ecotypic native plants, which are plants grown from seed, local seed, so Massachusetts seed or New England seed. And so those plants, so last year's milkweed, if you took last year's milkweed seeds and grew a plant this year, last year's milkweed seeds would have the memory of last year's wet summer. It would also have the memory of 2 years ago being really dry. So it would be ready to handle pretty much whatever New England's going to throw at it this year. So many of our native plants, they also love our crappy New England soil. So going to save you time and money, because you don't really have to take any heroic measures to grow them. You're like, wow, okay, I live on rocky, acidic soil. I got oaks and pines everywhere. And your plants are like, cool, I'm with it. You know, otherwise we have to be like, oh, now we have to add lime. We have to change the pH. We got to add some compost. We got to, no, native plants love that. Habitat support. I say think Yellowstone because, of course, many of us know the whole Yellowstone conversation, but when you think about how just a simple introduction of wolves into Yellowstone ended up changing the fish coming back, it changed the flows of the river, like that's impactful. If you haven't checked out that story, if you haven't read the impact of just one species and how it was able to change a river and bring fish back, like you wouldn't think, oh, I'm gonna bring in a wolf and the fish are gonna come back, like, but it happens. Fewer inputs. It's absolutely true. Like I said, they love our crappy soil. You also, if you help change the paradigm and we change our gardening practices to maybe leaving the leaves or at least leaving the biomass. When we cut down our plants, if you just let that sit in your garden, you will need fewer inputs. Now, why is this? Again, we go back to being real simple, but we thought we needed to have fertilizer. All year long, the plants, so this is Monarda punctata. So all year long, this Monarda is drawing up minerals from the soil. If I cut it down and send it to the landfill, if I throw it in a bag and send it to the dump, I've now taken all the minerals off my soil and sent it to the dump. If I take this and cut it up into little pieces and let it just rot in place, all those minerals go back into the soil. Real simple stuff that we know, but whenever we're like, and whenever Facebook gets full of leave the leaves, and you're like, okay, yeah, but the leaves are messy, or I have so many, or whatever. Why am I doing that? It's because that's how all the nutrients, that's called nutrient cycling. That's how it gets back. When you don't do that, then yes, you're going to have to add fertilizer, or you're going to have to add inputs. The only time you should have to add inputs is when you're growing vegetables. Why? Because we want those minerals in our body. That's how we get the minerals. The vegetables take the minerals out of the soil, then we eat the vegetables and they go into our body. So then the soil doesn't have vegetables because it's in our body. But for our landscape gardens, we don't have to worry about it. Healthy plants equal increased carbon cycling. So when you have that healthy photosynthesis in the plants feeds the life in the soil, you then have healthier soil. When you have healthy soil, you have healthy hydrology. It's a wonderful little circle that we have going on. And then when you have all that going on, you're pulling down more carbon out of the air. This is why I'm saying my 1/8 of an acre is combating climate change. And I'm sure that yours will do the same. Like I said, if we all get together, we can actually have a pretty good impact, either on a local level, but then on a global level, if you think about how many of us get together. Biodiversity is important. Now, many people will look at this picture. Somebody in this room or somebody online is probably freaking out because this upsets your sensibilities. I understand that. I'm putting this here to make a point. When you have lots and lots of plants and lots of different types of plants, there are major benefits to be had there. So in this garden right here, we'll just use this as an example. In this garden right here, somebody's eating one of these plants. Guess what? With all of these plants, somebody who eats that somebody is also in this garden, so we do not have to worry about buying a side because that somebody who eats somebody is also here. When we have all of these plants, the amount of wildlife that you are going to get, just planting, some red flowers and everything is great. Yep, you might get some hummingbirds and you're gonna get some bees. When you do this, watch what comes. When you have a yard with multiple things, the coneflower and the rudbeckia here, that is going to be speckled with finches in the fall. Now, what I specialize in now and what people are asking me to do now, where this upsets their sensibility, is can I have something with that biodiversity, but that reads a little better? So I do composed meadows. So I take all of these plants and I plant them in like big paisley swaths. So that when you're looking at it, when you're looking at one of my landscapes, you have all of these plants, but it doesn't look so erratic and so chaotic. It's a composed meadow, so they're all there. They're just in bigger groupings, so it reads better. Like I said, balance. I'm not asking everybody to let their yards go crazy like this if you think this is crazy. Some people are looking at this and they're like, that's gorgeous, I want that. But other people are like, whoa, that's too much for me, that's busy, that's messy, that's too wild, that's scary. Well, it could be scary to some people. There are snakes in there. Yep. That's the other thing. When you're planting wild. Yes, like you want like all the butterflies. You don't get to choose. You don't get to say no bees. I get that a lot. People will be like, I want a pollinator garden. I want lots and lots of butterflies. I just don't want the bees. Nope. That's a legit question that I get asked all the time. And then we have the biodiversity below the ground. And this, again, is extremely important. Because when you look at all these different root depths, what happens at all these different root depths? Well, at all these different root depths, we talked about how the roots push sugar into the ground and they feed the soil life. Well, that's feeding soil life 3-4 feet down. So now we have active soil 3 to 4 feet down, which increases our water holding capacity, Then with all these different root depths, raindrops, as the rain soaks into the soil, it follows the roots because that's the path of least resistance. So now we're feeding those roots, but we're also getting water deeper into the soil. So when we have a dry spell, now we have water deep, deep in the soil and we have deep, deep roots to tap into it. And it's not gonna all evaporate on the surface, so we can use less irrigation. So why does it all matter? Well, 98 million acres of native vegetation has been replaced by managed landscapes. We're managed landscapes, okay? It's not, managed landscapes isn't a bad thing. That's what we are. That's what our homes are. We're a managed landscape. 98 million acres. That is equal to the land of all of our national parks and all the land used for corn production in 2014 combined. So if you've ever been to a national park, if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, you're like, wow, this is massive. Bigger than that, okay? Bigger than all of them together. So that's a lot of land that we take up. And that's where I'm saying, let's find balance. We have to acknowledge that we take up all this land. We shouldn't punish ourselves or feel bad. I'm not asking anybody to do with less. I'm just asking you to do smarter with what you have. Studies have shown that non-native plants are linked to the decline of the abundance of insects. That decline in the abundance of insects has related to the decline in bird populations. It takes 9,000 caterpillars. If anybody's read Doug Tallamy, it takes 9,000 caterpillars to raise 5 chickadees. I have nesting chickadees, 2 families, every year. Love it, because that means I have so many caterpillars. I have 20,000 caterpillars that they can absolutely find to raise their broods, and that means I got a lot going on. Those caterpillars aren't going to live on non-native plants. So if you have a non-native landscape, you might have beautiful flowers, and you might have a lot of honeybees. That's not a win. Honeybees kiss everybody, okay? So that's not, if you see honeybees, that's not a win. You might have a lot of beautiful flowers, and you might have some wildlife, but if you want more finches, if you want more cardinals, robins, and chickadees, they need those caterpillars, and those caterpillars are going to be living on our native plants. Again, it's a Tallamy thing, but it's true, and I'm very grateful to him for bringing that out. So the plants you choose could save a species. So what I'm saying is, by choosing native plants or by gardening and landscaping a little smarter, you could be a superhero. If you would like, go home. You can throw like a sheet around your shoulders and run around the house and have a cape, and that's great. If you want, that's cool. Otherwise, you can just be one of those quiet superheroes, and that's also cool. These 3 ladies right here are either endangered or extinct locally all across New England. So these are just 3 bumblebee species. Now, some bumblebees are generalists, and you'll see them on your non-native plants. These 3 ladies right here are all specialists. And due to habitat loss, and due to the fact that many of the plants that they specialize on are just not cool right now, they're locally endangered. So then, like, again, why wouldn't you want to be a superhero? Why wouldn't you want to put in maybe one of these plants right here? You don't have to take this picture because you can go to the Gagir lab of UMass Dartmouth. Dr. Gagir, if you've looked at his, he specializes in endangered native bees. So if you look up Dr. Gagir, UMass Dartmouth, you will find lists like this. What I'm saying is, Monarda didyma, the scarlet bee balm, we plant that because we want hummingbirds. If you put that in, you might help save one of those bees. So why wouldn't you want to put in a plant that can make that much of a difference? Nibbling is a good thing. You want to have somebody eating your garden. If nobody's eating your garden, something is wrong. Here is the piece that I'm really trying to get out about insects and eating in your garden. If your plants are being decimated by caterpillars or insects. If they are absolutely skeletons and being decimated to no end, that's because your plants are sick. That's because it's the wrong plant in the wrong place. Because a healthy plant that is photosynthesizing properly will create complete proteins, amino acids, whether it is a vegetable or whether it is a geranium. If it is photosynthesizing and has all the nutrients and you have healthy soil and healthy hydrology, and that plant is photosynthesizing properly, it will complete its proteins. It will have healthy amino acids. When it does that, it becomes indigestible to caterpillars. When you have a healthy plant in that same situation and it is completing lipids in its leaves, it has the fatty leaves, it becomes indigestible to fungus. So you will not have powdery mildew on your phlox or whatever it might be. If it is completing full-on polyphenols, which is what makes the plants smell, which is why the strawberry, smells so good before you eat it, or a tomato smells, those are the polyphenols. If it's completing complete polyphenols and has an abundance of them, it becomes indigestible to beetles. Now, we spent money on plants and then see something on our plants, eating our plants, and we freak out. We're like, hey, I spent good money on that. And then we go and spend more money on something else to kill those insects when it's their job. Mother Nature was like, hey, I need you guys to get rid of all the crappy plants so the healthy plants can grow. And then we decided they were enemies, in part because we spent money on those plants. Now, if you come to Weston Nurseries this summer in Hopkinton, you are going to see 2 absolutely gorgeous hibiscus, perennial hibiscus plants on the side of the parking lot with no leaves. Every single year, they hate it there. They're miserable. They hate the heat. They hate the salt. They hate the sand. They hate the exhaust when people leave their tailpipes on and when they're idling. They're absolutely, the flowers are great. They have no leaves. Every single year, they get decimated. You go elsewhere into one of our other gardens, you'll see similar perennial hibiscus, Love and Life. They look great, little nibble here and there. That's okay. But these get decimated. Why? Because nature is like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me just put you out of your misery. She's just trying to end it. And it isn't happening. And maybe someday we'll move them, but until then, I'm just going to. You might be wondering where to start. Like, how does this all happen? Where do I start? Well, this is, so for all of you, if you're looking for a place to start, and this is how I look at native plants. And this is how I look at much of what I've been talking about. If you look at it like a cuisine you're unfamiliar with. So I'm just going to say like Indian cuisine for me. Do I like it? Absolutely. When I go to the restaurant and I look at all the different menu items, do I know how to order it? Well, I know how to order some of it. When I get all the ingredients at my house, can I make any of the dishes? No, not really. So if you look at native plants like that, it's very similar. You might like the ingredients. You may have gone somewhere. You may have gone to like Costa Maine Botanic Gardens or Native Plant Trust and seen these gardens and been like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful, that's delicious. But then you don't know how to recreate it. So what I've done is I've created 7 gardens on the Weston website. If you go under natives, there are 7 gardens with plant lists. They're teeny, teeny gardens just like this. They look like this. And they have a full-on plant list. So in these gardens, the colors represent the color of the blooms. The numbers represent how many plants in each area. They're 100-square-foot gardens. The idea is these are your starter recipes. There is an endangered pollinator species. There is a pollinator powerhouse. There is a hummingbird garden. There is a hell strip garden, which you can only kind of have hell strips here in Acton, which is the space between the street and the sidewalk, that little 2-foot where all the dogs pee. Yep, there are native plants that will live there. So there is a garden just for that. So they look like this, and like I said, there's one for wet, there's another one for dry, there's and shade. So there's just 7 gardens. These are like your 7 starter recipes. They can all be used together. So you can say, I want to use the pollinator powerhouse garden, and I want to use the hummingbird garden. Yep, you can plant them all together. You don't have to follow the plans at all. The plans are just there. They're just there just to have plans. It's really getting the list out to people that I wanted. So if you do not have to go to Weston to get this, it's all free. The idea was to get in there and to get the information out to people So you have your 7 starter recipes, so you have a jumping off point. Then, with anything else, once you cook with those ingredients enough and you become familiar with them, then you can start making your own recipes. You can start doing your own thing. And that's where it becomes great. But how will it save the world? Well, again, boom, back to 5th grade. 95% of the Earth's heating and cooling is controlled by the hydrologic cycle. We just talked about that in the very first slide, pretty much, was how New England is 2 degrees warmer than the rest of the planet. Well, through evapotranspiration, we transfer 25% of solar radiation back into the atmosphere. So the more green space we have, the more evapotranspiration, which is when the moisture leaves the leaves, that's pushing 25% of solar radiation back into the atmosphere, cooling our planet. 1/3 of solar radiation is reflected back into the atmosphere by clouds. So if we have barren soil, like in that ag picture, on our construction sites and on our giant parking lots, we create this heat island effect, which you've all heard about. When we have all of that evapotranspiration, and when we have lots of water holding capacity in our soil, then we have local evaporation. That gives us clouds, that provides local cooling. The more water that goes into the air, clouds move around. Now we're cooling the planet. You're doing that with your backyard. See, we all know that plants need rain, but rain needs plants. We need to put the water back into the atmosphere. This is where, if you look at California and you wonder, like, oh, what's happened to California? Well, all that farming. So before, the clouds would come off the ocean towards California. They'd hit the mountains. And in California had all that rain. That's why we had that fertile valley there, because there was all that rain. There was all this life happening there. Then we stripped it down and made it bare like that picture. So now there's a heat bubble. So now the clouds come off and they go up and over and they keep going. And so now California's turning into a desert. That's where the wildfires are coming from and everything else. That's why the irrigation is going up in California. That's why we're having water problems across the country, because these large dry areas are not they're not allowing the clouds to stay. If you have evaporation, then it all just goes away. And by away, I mean up into the atmosphere, and it just keeps going and it lands somewhere else. And it's not here. So if we want to have microclimates, and if we want to have a healthy local climate, then we need to have all of this green space. We need to have that evapotranspiration. What we're missing, so there's 2 things that you may have not learned in 5th grade. So there's 2 water cycles. There's the long water cycle, which is when the water comes off the ocean, and we get those deluges that we get, those heavy rains with all the water coming off the ocean. Then there's the short water cycle. The short water cycle is the dew on the grass in the morning. The short water cycle is a sun shower that just kind of pops up out of nowhere. That's because of local evaporation. That's the healthiest water. That water has the most effect on our vegetation, on our soil, and on our wildlife. It also offers a massive amount of cooling capacity. So this is a slide I put in almost every one of my presentations because it is one of my favorite quotes. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Why do I love this? Because I am not going to get any of you to buy native plants if I plant shame you. If I come to your house and be like, why do you have all of this? You're going to push back. Or if I say, you need to have a meadow, you're going to be like, I don't want a meadow. But if I have a meadow, or we create demonstration gardens, or have areas of green space within the town, and we have meadows, we have native plants, and people can be like, wow, that's gorgeous, I want that. Now we've made the old model obsolete. Now we've made lawns, the giant rolling lawn, obsolete. And that's how we're going to make change, not by plant shaming people, not by telling anybody you're doing it wrong. That's not how to do it. The way they get us, the way it happens all the time, right here, cell phones. You have your phone, you're like, I love this phone. 2-3 years later, you're like, this phone's terrible, that phone's awesome. They do it to us all the time. They make the old model obsolete. We need to do that with our approach to the climate crisis. We need to do that with our approach to landscape and land care, is by showing people that it works, by showing people native plants and meadows are beautiful. by showing people that having butterflies everywhere in your yard and birds flitting about is exactly what you want. So, I mean, I have, again, Arlington, I'm surrounded on 4 sides, essentially. I have the street on one side with somebody across the street and houses on the other 3 sides. As I talked about, I have massive amounts of birds in my yard, including the ducks that visit. And that is because I've focused on this and my little stamp. And my neighbor, who has hummingbird feeders galore, is just like, why do you have so many hummingbirds? Because they'd much rather come to my little place. Yes, do they love your feeders? Sure, because that's quick and easy sugar. That's like, whew. You know, I don't have to visit a million flowers. I can just hit that feeder. But where are they going to come? Where are they nesting? Where's all that happening? In the nice, safe place. So we have now come to the end. I thank you very much for your time. I hope that I have inspired you to work with your properties and that you realize that each and every one of us can combat climate change with the land that we have. I would also like to share all of this information with you because some of you may not have an opportunity to ask a question tonight, or some of you may be, like later this season, be like, I would like to do a pollinator garden. I would like to do a rain garden. I would like to put in permeable pavements. Absolutely contact me. I put this out there for that. I want to empower you to make these things happen. People reach out to me all the time. I was on the phone this afternoon on my lunch break talking to an architect who took one of my classes, and she's down in New Jersey. Is Weston seeing any money from that? No. Am I seeing any money from that? No. Is she saving her town with a giant bioswale that she's doing that's stopping all this runoff from 2 different parking lots? Yes. Do I want to see that happen? I certainly do. And I want to make sure that she's empowered to do it and do it right, because the more people that do it and the more people that are successful with it, the more people will adopt it. If we just kind of create a pollinator garden or a rain garden and becomes an invasive pit full of trash, then everybody's going to say those things don't work. But if we approach them properly and with the right mindset, then it will work. And then people will adopt it and we'll make the old model obsolete. I thank you all very much.
That was amazing. Hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. I have some questions that came from people before the presentation even took place. They were so excited. They sent some questions to us in advance. And if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you those. I did see one that came in the chat. Someone asked if the recipes for your gardens, your starter gardens, was on the Weston website, and they are, aren't they?
It is under the native plant section.
Okay.
So yes, then the gardens are there. You go to Weston Nurseries, you go to the native plant section, and you will see gardens. You click around there, and all those gardens will come up, and you'll see little squares one for each garden. Like I said, there are 7 of them. You can just poke around. And again, the layout and everything is yours. This is just an idea of ingredients that you can put together. All of the plants that are on those lists have been procured for their ecological impact. So they are either a host plant, or they are a heavy pollinator or nectar plant, or they are a heavy seed plant to support birds. So there's always something there with each one. They're all beautiful, but the gardens themselves are designed to be extremely impactful.
Okay, first question I have here is, what can we use to replace invasives?
Anything. So the first piece is that we need to remove invasives. Now, what are invasives? Well, invasives could be garlic mustard. Invasives could be massive amounts of bittersweet. Invasives could be Japanese knotweed. All of them are different. Garlic mustard, pretty easy to eradicate. Knotweed, not so much. So we have to take different approaches to how we do all of that. What we can do, and what we do have the ability to do, is to remove the burning bush, is to remove the calorie pear, is to remove, anything, barberry. Barberry is a haven for ticks. So if you have barberry and you don't like ticks, get it out of there. Why is it a haven for ticks? Because mice use it for refuge. So the mice go in there, they have the ticks on them, then the ticks drop off the mice, and then they're in the barberry. Then we go buy the barberry, or we're gardening or something like that, and there are all the ticks. So we can start with our own properties and just working there. On a town level, yes, we can have massive pulls and we can bring people in to eradicate the heavy infested areas, but just start by removing your burning bush. Just start by removing your barberry.
I have to give credit to my friend Barbara because she just ripped out some invasives in her yard. I'm like, why are you bothering to do that? So there you go. Okay, how can we use drip irrigation with rain barrels?
That is a whole other presentation, and also not necessarily easy to do. So I have a love-hate relationship with rain barrels. Anybody who's seen my stormwater presentation knows that. So rain barrels are great. I don't diss rain barrels, but rain barrels usually are not necessarily super attractive. So people put them on the remote corner of their garage or their property or something, nowhere near where they actually want to use the water. So that makes it hard. The other piece is rain barrels don't necessarily always give you the pressure that you want or need. So if you were going to use it with some sort of a drip irrigation or something, you would have to have a pump involved, in which case that rain barrel only holds 50 to 75 gallons. That's going to go like that. So rain barrels and drip irrigation, not necessarily so much. It'll go too fast. Can you do it? Sure. And if you'd like to do it, go ahead. It's going to take a lot of pieces and parts from different places to make it go, and you're definitely going to need a pump. You can't just rely on the gravity to take the water through the drip irrigation.
Okay, I have someone who wants to know if you're reducing the grass portion of your lawn, but you have a problem because there's a lot of area that's overshadowed by trees.
So again, I've done on Weston Nurseries and on the Ecological Landscape Alliance. I talk very much about, I also have a presentation on lawn alternatives. So if you have a shady, dry area, say with oaks or pines, then a lawn alternative like Pennsylvania carex would be great there. It'll fill in, it looks like grass, it does quite well. It is an early bloomer, it's in bloom now, so all those bumblebee queens that we were talking about, they need that pollen to keep them going so that they can build their homes and build their nests and hives for this year's offspring. So finding lawn alternatives would be great. So Pennsylvania carex is the first one that comes to mind when you're talking about dry shade. If you're talking about a large lawn, then there are plenty of other things you can do. I always suggest the starter package is expanding the beds that you have. If you have an island in your lawn, make it a little bigger. If you have a foundation planting, make it a little bigger. If you are somebody who I just saw like 2 weeks ago, they had 3 acres of lawn. I said, if you're not holding soccer tournaments here, let's figure out what we can do with this. There are plenty of lawn alternatives. One of my favorites is the woodland strawberry, Fragaria virginiana. It grows extremely fast. It is extremely durable. You can walk all over it. You can't play soccer on it, but you can walk all over it. It'll be fine. It's got little teeny fruits the size of your pinky nail that have more flavor in them than a whole case of Driscoll strawberries. So another reason why I like them. Plus they turn red in the fall. Your grass turns green and brown. Well, this turns green, has flowers, then berries, then turns red. Bang for your buck. Also grows, like I said, extremely fast. So that is another great one, and there are a number of others that I have out there in the articles if you want to go find them.
Okay, here's a big one. How convince your community that grass is not necessary? I think you've...
Well, we've talked a little bit about it, but it is coming down to, people think that grass is low maintenance, but is it? You know, mowing, okay, if you have a small lawn, that's easy. I am not a kill your lawn person. I am a reduce your lawn person. I have a little teardrop of lawn. Why do I like it? When I have a gathering and people come, that's where people go. When I want to like observe my garden, that's where I stand. Walking barefoot on grass, known to reduce stress, known to be very good for your health, brings you back to your childhood, lay there, look at the clouds. Grass is not a terrible thing. You don't need 3 acres of it, so yes, reduce it. Now, when we're talking irrigation, we have to talk about water use. We have to talk about water bans and being the smartest use of water, and also our water health, because of all the things that we put on our lawns are damaging our waterways. This is why we have the don't eat the fish. It's one of the many reasons we have the don't eat the fish in this river, because of all the things we put on our lawn. So if you want to kind of follow the repercussions of our lawn care and then ask yourself, do I really want to spend this money? And do I really need my lawn so bad that I can't eat the fish and, I have to pay all this money and this and that? There's plenty of reasons. And then as far as irrigation is concerned, water isn't endless. Water is, all the water we have is pretty much all the water we've ever had, and it just recycles again and again, but it's coming differently. It comes really fast and it runs off because of the way we're built up. So if you want to kind of create a water conservation plan for your property or for your town, reducing your lawns and reducing your irrigation is one way to do it.
Okay, should I be fertilizing shrubs in the spring? Are there organic fertilizers I would be using?
So I'm a huge advocate for leaving the leaves. I'm a huge advocate for using compost. If you can get a nice organic compost, go ahead and use that. I am not a huge advocate unless you know what you need. I am not a huge advocate for going out and buying powdered minerals and the like and spreading them everywhere unless you know what you need. Unless you know your soil is depleted or what you're deficient in. Otherwise, you're just putting a bunch of stuff down with a promise. So no, you don't necessarily need to. If you have peonies, if you have clematis, if you have roses, composting around the base now will give them a lot, that will decompose and that will give them a lot of the nutrients they need for when they're in bloom. So if you're looking to go at it that way, that is a definite way to do it. If you are, the one thing I will advocate for, like when planting, would be using this is a recipe that I give out I do a Tuesday night Zoom. If you want to come, Tuesday night, free, 6 to 7, every Tuesday, April to October. You can hang out, we can talk. But the recipe that I give on there, for especially when you're planting, or if you have things like clematis, roses, and peonies, you use a 1/4 cup of Neptune's Harvest and a 1/4 cup of the Biotone, the Espoma Biotone starter, 5-gallon bucket. Mix all that up, 5 gallons of water, and then add that to your garden. About 1 gallon per perennial, 3 gallons for shrubs, full 5 gallons for trees. Do I advocate doing that in established landscapes? No, certainly not. But when you have heavy feeders like roses, which I'm not saying don't have, I'm just saying limit your roses. That 70-30 is where you want to go. 70% native, you have 30% non-native. I like non-native plants as well. So like hellebore, I have a lot of hellebore in my yard, love them. They're gorgeous right now, huge fan. So using something like that, is great, but otherwise, like I talked about, leaving the leaves, leaving the biomass when you cut down the prior year's things, letting that all decompose right there, that's how you're gonna have the healthiest soil.
Speaking of soil, you mentioned about the problem of compacted soil. Is there something that can be done to uncompact soil?
So activating the soil life is the best way to do it. So for lawns, let's just say for lawns or for new landscapes, if you aerate and compost, so either have a company come in and aerate or rent an aerator, aerate it, it's only gonna punch 2 inches down. And then you rake in some compost, that will get the water and compost down into the soil. That will feed the soil life, that will bring water deeper into the soil. Nature will then take care of herself. If you repeat that process a few times, you will absolutely be fine. That is probably the best way, the simplest way and the best way to do it. And it's just going to take time. If you have just recently put, say, an addition on your house and had machines all over your property or on the back of your house, your soil is completely compacted. So a soil reclamation process is what you want to take on. And in doing something like that, by adding that organic matter, feeding that soil life, all those worms, all those beetles, they'll move around and they'll do their thing. Now, if you want to quickly add, one way that I used to do with my company, and this is not always the best way and easily accessible, but what I would do is I would aerate, I would compost, and then I would use a compost tea that was full of all of those, like the protozoa and the nematodes, all that biology that we wanted, but I also put in some blackstrap molasses. That blackstrap molasses is straight carbohydrate. So essentially what you do is you're initiating a feeding frenzy within the soil. You're gonna have a bacterial bloom, and then everybody that eats the bacteria is gonna come in, and then everybody that eats them is gonna come in, and them, and them, and them. So you kind of age your soil quickly. And then once that bacteria dies down and everybody's eating everybody, they'll either leave or they'll just continue to hang out. But that's one way to add a quick age to your soil and decompact it at a greater rate.
Someone was asking about if you're trying to start a meadow and you try and plant some natives, how do you keep, it's a hard job, right? Because the invasives keep taking over the natives you're trying to get to grow.
So meadows in our mind sound real easy, real majestic, not so much. I'm not saying they're hard, but if you start meadow from seed, it's going to take you 3 to 4 years before it looks like anything, and you're going to have to be up on it, keeping out every single weed seed that starts in there and everything else. If you start it from gallons and plugs, those first years and until those plants get established, you are going to have to stay up on it and keep out. You're forever going to have to keep out many of the weed seeds. But however, once it fills in and does its thing, it will pretty much regulate itself and become a lot lower maintenance. We are talking maintained landscapes. So if you want to just let it go and be wild, then you can't complain about whatever moves in. But if you're trying to just have your meadow species, then you're going to have to keep non-meadow species out. So birds are going to, you want the birds in your meadow. They're going to drop seeds that you may not want in your meadow there. Those seeds may germinate. The thicker your meadow gets, the fewer of those seeds will germinate. But you're going to have to stay vigilant. I'm not saying you have to give up an entire Saturday, but you are going to have to stay vigilant even once your meadow matures. In the beginning, meadows are relatively high maintenance. You have to stay on top of them. Meadow in a can, not a thing. So don't believe that you can just have a patch of dirt, whip some seeds out there, and you're going to have, gorgeous Sound of Music. You're not going to be spinning out Sound of Music style in like a year or two. It doesn't work like that. I'm sorry.
Poison ivy, big problem for a lot of us, and we understand we shouldn't be putting poison because it ends up in the water. Is there a safe way to get rid of poison ivy?
First of all, poison ivy is not bad. If poison ivy is on a portion of your property that you do not frequent often and you know it's there, leave it alone. It's a wonderful plant. The berries on the plant are extremely important for migrating birds. If you know where it is and it's not bothering you, don't bother it. If it's in your perennial beds, then the best way to get rid of it is to pull it out. And yes, there is that moment of danger when you're pulling it out, but it's actually not terribly hard to eradicate once you pull it out of there. So if it is in a place where you interact and you're going to get it, then yes, pull it out, and that's the best way to eradicate it. If it's like on the back of your property, growing up a tree or running through the woods, and you know it's there and it's not bothering you, you can leave it alone. There's nothing written. I've read a lot of books. Nowhere has it ever said, if you have poison ivy, you must eradicate it and get rid of it. No, and the birds will thank you for it, honestly.
Okay. Anything special or any good suggestions for planting on a slope?
That's a tough one to answer because I don't know how steep your slope is. Are we talking a cliff? That's one thing. If it's just a gentle, incline, that's another. If you are dealing with erosion, you have a relatively steep slope with not a lot of vegetation, and you're dealing with erosion, you may want to bring in a professional so that you can put up some jute netting, some erosion control over that, and then you are going to plug or plant into that, and you want to get root mass into that slope if you are just trying to keep this slope from eroding. Otherwise, things like we talked about, like the strawberry, another wonderful ground cover and lawn alternative, Anemone canadense, is a great one. It spreads very fast. It will run through. What you need to do is you want to cover the soil and you want to have roots in the soil. If you do that, then you will reduce your erosion. You will cover your hillside. So that's the whole point. If you think about trees, or if you think about plants in general, what they're doing, a raindrop falls. If you have a head like mine, you know that raindrops fall at 20 miles an hour. You need to reduce that speed and gently set it to the ground. That's why trees are great, because trees will catch that rain and they will set it to the ground gently. Or they will catch that rain and they will set it down to the perennial layer, who will set it down gently. So you just want to cover the soil and you want something to intercept that rain velocity and then slowly disperse it to the soil, and then it will get absorbed. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
In our town, we can get a transfer station, compost the soil or wood chips. How do I know that it doesn't have PFAS in it or pesticides or herbicides that I'm not going to want?
You don't. So the question is, when you're using municipal soil, when you're using municipal mulch, leaf mulch, wood chips, et cetera, how do we know that there aren't any contaminants in it? And the short answer is you don't, because you may have 12 people that are entirely organic and you have wonderful material there, and they just didn't know better, so they just sent it all away. But then all you need is another handful of people who are heavy chemical Roundup and fertilizer users, and that can all wind up in your, so I certainly don't advocate for any of that if you're growing vegetables in your landscape. Not a huge fan. If it's your only option, then okay. But there is no way, unless the town is going to test that soil or test the compost, there is no way to guarantee that it doesn't have something in it. And you just like PFAS, yep, microplastics, that's a whole other presentation, but if you want to hear me go off for like 2 hours, get me started on that. Yes, in the back. Question was jumping worms. Question's always jumping worms. What can we do about jumping worms? Nothing at the moment. So the people will swear by tea tree oil and say that it works. I don't know. I haven't seen it proven. You can use a mustard mixture. You take mustard and water and pour that on your soil, and it draws them to the surface because it irritates them. And then you just have to collect them and kill them, scooping up the field mice, bashing them over the head. It's really the only way that you can handle. And the best thing to do is to do that in like May, June, so they don't lay cocoons for the next year. So you want to get them before they do their cocoons. So if you're going to try to get them out of your garden, the other ways like diatomaceous earth or the like might get them out of your garden, but it's going to drive them elsewhere. It's not going to kill them. It will just drive them elsewhere. And so for me personally, I would much rather have jumping worms in my garden than to drive them into the wildlands, into the native woodlands. It's where they're going to eat up all the native seeds and the duff and really affect the entire ecosystem. So I'd rather just keep them contained on my property and just take a hit for the team than to send them into the woods. And especially here in Acton, you're sending them into the woods. In Arlington, it's like I said, I have people on all sides of me, so I'm not that worried. But jumping worms are a thing. There isn't necessarily any method that I know yet to kill them, eradicate them, or anything else. I know people are actively working on it. I know if you go online, you'll be inundated with suggestions. You can try them out, and you can get back to me, the email address that I gave you, and let me know if it works. But to my knowledge, there's nothing that I can say about jumping worms. The other piece is, the other question may get or may not get is voles. Okay, any kind of voles or rodents, that's another one that's very hard, at least for me, because I am microplastics and PFAS, yeah. Okay, rodenticides, that's my other one. Huge. I come from Arlington. We killed the bald eagle. Okay, our rat poison killed the bald eagle. I waited my entire life, my entire childhood. I never saw a bald eagle. I had to be an adult before I started seeing bald eagles. We had a nesting pair in Arlington, and we killed one of them because we were trying to take care of the rats. So it's not a thing. I am not an advocate for rodenticides. So if you're asking me questions about voles, I don't really have a good one about that either. Sorry. Yes. Love it. So the question was, moss is taking over the property. And my answer is just lean into it. It's green, it's low maintenance. You don't have to mow it. It's excellent. What it's letting you know is you probably have very acidic soil. You have moist soil. And so Mother Nature is extremely demure, okay? She is going to cover herself at all costs. So in that situation, the situation on your property and the way the climate is on your property, that's what she's chosen to do so. So if you would like to get rid of the moss, you're going to have to change the pH of your soil by adding lime. And then you are going to have to start seeding in and trying to grow lawn there, or you can just embrace that beautiful evergreen green. and go with that. The other piece, when we were talking about compaction, this is the one that really gets me and that I love, is that, and this is, so if you have an irrigation system, and if you have a land care company, somebody who mows your lawn, what I say is, find out what day they're going to come and don't run your irrigation on that day. Because what will happen is your irrigation is going to go off at like 4 in the morning, 6 in the morning. It's going to saturate the top 2 inches of soil. The landscapers are going to come and they're going to drive their machines all over your property. They're going to compact your soil and squeeze all the air and water holding capacity out of the top of your soil. And we're going to have compaction, like we were talking about. Mother Nature's answer to compaction is crabgrass. So then that company is going to come and they're going to say, you have crabgrass. You need our crabgrass policy. And nobody ever thinks to say, it's your fault. You pay for it. No, so they double dip, and that's how they get you, because they compact your soil, then they make it conducive to crabgrass, then you get that crabgrass, and then they sell you crabgrass preventer. So it's a vicious cycle that we get on, whereas if you just decompact your soil and enrich that organic matter and that hydrology, you're going to be just fine. Was there a question? Yes, sir. So there isn't a design that is to come. Oh, sorry. We'll say deer and rabbits. So the 7 designs on the Weston website, there isn't one yet, they are to come, that are specifically deer and rabbit resistant. I will tell you my secrets for designing and or products to handle deer and rabbit. So if you are going to go the product route, you will want to use a granular and a liquid. The granular needs to go down now before the bunnies discover anything. So as your hosta's coming up or whatever it is, get that granular down now, so when they come exploring for their spring meal, they're gonna be like, this place is gross, I'm out. Then when everything leaves out and we stop getting as much rain, you switch over to a liquid on the leaves. And then throughout the season, you alternate, because if you just use one product, they get used to it, they'll figure it out, and it will fail. So you have to go between a granular and a liquid. Now, the natural way to do this, and this has been proven, I have proven this multiple times on property, so this does work. The natural way to do this is to understand that deer do not like anything minty. They do not like anything oniony. They do not like anything fuzzy. They do not like anything prickly. They're kind of like 4-year-olds. They do eat your roses, and that's because they can put their lips around the rose without getting prickled by it. So the way to go around and the way to kind of, rabbits do not like anything minty and anything oniony. So the way to do this, and it doesn't proof your garden, but is a deterrent, is to plant more of that. Now I'm going to tell you a story on how we did this, and the first ways, and we're now year 4 or 5, where it's been proven. So there was a client. She had a stone wall with a big hedge behind it and a lot of hydrangea in front. The deer were devastating the hydrangea. She said, I want to have my hydrangea. How do I do this? Well, we went with oniony, minty, fuzzy. So we planted in the very front of the bed. We have things like, we used non-natives like catmint and the like along the front. Just behind that, we used natives like nodding onion. We also used anything kind of like ornamental chive family. So we mixed it all up. We tried to put as many natives in as possible. So now the rabbits and the deer, they have to push through minty and oniony. And then the next layer, we had bee balm and mountain mint, and then we had like bulb alliums in there. So now it's like, now it's just getting really gross. So now I'm a deer, and now I have to push through all this mint and all this onion just to get the hydrangea on the other side. Did they? Yes, a little bit. Did they a lot? No. And it's actually stood steadfast. So that's where you interplant. So for instance, if you have echinacea or rudbeckia, if you have black-eyed Susans and coneflower, and you plant around them bee balm, or you plant around them anything in that onion family, then the rabbits and everybody, the rabbits that will decimate those things, will have to push through all that. Will they get to it? They might. Do they get to it a lot less? Absolutely. So you're just using nature against nature. You just have a real picky kid. On the other hand, I use nature against nature all the time with my clients. They're like, I don't want native plants. Native plants are messy. And then I say, okay, how about this? We're going to have a low maintenance garden that's going to bloom from April to September. And then all you have to do is cut it back and it'll start all over again. They're like, yes, I want that. And I'll be like, and it'll attract butterflies and birds. They're like, yes, I want that. So we just plant the native garden. We just hide the vegetables and it's all good. So again, nature against nature. All you got to do is outsmart nature and you're good to go. Anybody else? Yes. Okay, so I will tell, this is how exactly what I've recently done with my garden this spring, because I have to find the balance within my household. So my beds are about, say, 6 to 8 feet deep. So in the spring, I edge my beds because I have that little spit of lawn, so I edge my beds out. And so once we get this warm weather and once I see the queen bees flying around, that's when I know it's okay to go ahead and cut my beds down. So I cut down all of last year's organic matter. I leave the leaves and leave the stems. I cut all of that down to 8 inches. Why? Because I want all those nesting bees to nest in the stems. Then I take those stems and I use my clippers and I just like chop it up small. But I do that in like the back 4 feet of the bed. And then in the front 2 feet of the bed is where I use that leaf mulch. So in April, right now, my garden looks a little awkward, like a new haircut. I know, not the one to talk about a haircut, but kind of it looks a little bit awkward because you're looking at it and you have like this clean line of mulch and then you have like all of this biomass. Now, why do I do that? Well, like I said, I'm finding balance. I have this garden that looks like a garden, but then in the back, if you cover your entire garden with mulch, then the ground nesting bees can't nest. If you cover your entire garden with mulch, then there aren't any muddy spots for the pollinators to find water because they're not going to dive into a puddle. They like sipping on like mud and wet spots. So the back 4 feet is for the ground nesting bees. Why? Because I'm not in the back 4 feet. You can have at it. On the edge where anybody's going to visit, in those first 2 feet, those first 3 feet, where anybody's actually going to be, nobody's going to disturb a bee's nest because they're all to the back. And that's where my queens, I'm noticing that they're all starting to like dig out. And then again, having that bare soil allows places for pollinators to rest. If you're trying to attract pollinators, you need to support the whole lifestyle. So not just having pretty flowers, that's great. Now you have nectar and pollen, but if they can raise their families there, if you have the host plants for the butterflies and the caterpillars are there, then you will have butterflies like you can't believe. Whereas if you just have the pretty flowers, you'll have visitors. They're not going to set up shop. I want everybody to come over and make a home with me and hang out. And I want flying flowers all over my property. I don't necessarily get to see them because I'm gone all day, but everybody tells me that they're there. Did that kind of answer your question? Good. Anybody else? Anything online? We're good. All right. Thank you so much for spending your evening with me. This was wonderful.
I almost forgot, I just want to mention one thing. The Acton Library has soil test kits that you can check out. There's 2 of them. So that was pretty cool. Well, I just, again, thank you very much, Trevor. I think we've learned a lot.